Okay. That's Larry. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the Wednesday, April 19th, 2023 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically, but we intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone or Zoom only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or join via the Zoom link. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 19. All right, so Chris, if you could now call roll, please.
Not a problem. I'll now call roll. I've received regrets from Commissioner Margolis and Commissioner Lee, who will not be able to attend. Please say here and from where you are dialing when your name is called. Commissioner Bolin?
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Ackman?
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Brogan?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Automaki?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hook?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Keeler?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clayman?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Lee? Is absent. Commissioner Anderson?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Wankoff? Okay. Commissioner Hess?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Hutchinson?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Margolis is absent today. Lieutenant Mike Sherbo? Okay. And Commissioner Stuka is also absent. Okay. We are in quorum.
Okay, yep, we have quorum. So there are two items on the consent agenda, approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes. Are there any modifications to the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? All right, Julie and seconded by Dharma. All those in favor, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
All right, and those opposed, please say no or raise your hand. Okay, consent agenda is approved. All right, now we go to the public comment section. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Again, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or the person's Zoom ID. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address, well, just your name at the beginning of your comments. So let's see, yeah. Raymond, do we have anyone that's raising their hand?
I don't see any at the moment. I do want to acknowledge that Commissioner Lee has joined us, so thank you for the heads up.
Oh, I see that, yeah. Okay, I see the attendees, no raised hands, okay. All right. Okay, all right, so I guess that closes public comment. As always, I think, Raymond, if someone raises their hand or enters later in the meeting, we can consider to give them an opportunity to speak then. We kind of done that in the past or not really?
Yeah, it's at your discretion. I think it
Okay.
is one of the things that, we should try to probably be as consistent as possible just to make sure that we stick to the cadence of the meeting. But I know sometimes there are extenuating circumstances, especially if people have a hard time connecting. So
Sure. All right, so business section of the meeting, there are no action items on this month's agenda. But in information and discussion, first up, we have the budget presentation from Marty Prashad. The city is in the midst of developing its budget for fiscal year 24, which begins July 1st. Marty Prashad is with us this evening to give a brief overview of the draft budget and answer any questions we may have. So Marty, I see that you're a co-host, I believe.
Good evening. I'm gonna attempt to share my screen here, so just let me know if you're able to see that.
Coming through.
All righty, we good to go?
Yes, indeed.
All righty. Thank you so much. For those of you who have not met, I am Marty Prashad, Chief Financial Officer for the City of Ann Arbor, and tonight I will be giving you an overview of the fiscal year 24 recommended budget, and I'm attempting to highlight items that the Commission may have particular interest.
And Marty, real quick, if people have questions, maybe like at the end of each slide, if you want to raise your hand on Zoom, that way I can see if people have questions, and or unless you'd rather people wait until the very end, but.
No, I don't have a preference. Actually, that was what I was going to say next.
Right.
I have a rather quick presentation because I know you have a few this evening. I'm happy to answer questions either at the end or after each slide, whichever you prefer.
Okay.
I'll keep moving unless you, until you stop me. And if there's any further details that I might provide during or after, I'm happy to do so. Just let me know.
Sounds good. Thanks.
You bet. Okay. A quick overview of the entire budget, which City Administrator Dohoney delivered to full council Monday evening, has a total budget of $563.7 million. In general, that amount is in line with previous years. It's a typical amount. It's not out of the ordinary. The budget is comprised of several different fund types. The major categories and where you see the most dollars, obviously, is in the general fund with 129.2 million. Enterprise funds account for 149 million. Special revenue funds at $101.1 million. And that is typically the category in which you'll see most of the transportation activities are funded. You'll see funds like millage funds, street, bridge, sidewalk millages, Act 51 or weight and gas tax in those categories. We have 50.8 in trust funds, and trust funds are things like our pension funds, our retirement healthcare funds, and finally 133.6 in what we refer to as the other category, which would encompass things like our internal service funds. Internal service funds are service areas or units that provide internal support to activities on a user basis. So some examples of those types of funds would be our fleet and facilities fund and also our IT or information technology funds. The submitted general fund maintains a fund balance that is within city policy guidelines of maintaining 50 to 20%. Each of these fund types will, per policy, have different thresholds for fund balance requirements. But in general, all funds that we are proposing is as part of this budget are within policy guidelines for minimum fund balance requirements. Another positive thing for the city is our general obligation bond rating remains at a AA+, which is excellent. It puts us in good position to leverage dollars for bonding should a need arise. I should also mention that our water and sewer funds also have excellent bond ratings and are AA and AA+, respectively. We'll go into a little more detail about some of these funds that you would typically see funding our transportation activities. The first fund that we'll talk about is the major and local street funds. You might hear this referred to as weight and gasoline tax funds or Michigan transportation funds, or even Public Act 51, which is the act that establishes the gasoline tax. This fund is forecasted to generate about $15.8 million in revenue for fiscal year 24. The revenue is collected by the state of Michigan and is dispersed to local units based on a formula, which considers both the population of miles of roadway within the city. You'll notice, as represented on a bar chart, the trajectory for the revenue is upward. Back in 2015, the state legislature passed legislation which increased the revenue stream over a period of 5 years, which accounts for, this steady rise here through fiscal year 22. That legislation is now fully implemented. You'll see here in fiscal year 23, we still show some growth. But as we move on to 24 and 25, we're a little more conservative in those projections because this revenue stream obviously is directly impacted by sales of gasoline. Sales of gasoline are impacted by such thing as inflation, recessionary conditions, or the opposite of that, lower price environments. At this point, we're kind of at an interesting point economically where there are still indicators that exist that point towards recession. However, there are some positive signs that point toward decreasing inflation and strong economics. We typically see Act 51 revenue lagging behind due to impacts. It takes a while for folks to be impacted and not fill their gas tanks. So we usually see a lagging impact from those changes. For this reason, we decided to be conservative in what we're projecting along with the state of Michigan. So you'll see that we're kind of just being a little bit flat, 1 to 3% in 24 and 25. The good thing about this is if we see the economic trend changing or the revenue stream changing and we're realizing more revenue, we have the opportunity at next cycle to make that correction. On the expense side, you can see the proposed budget of $21 million, and that's both the major and local street fund. And the expenditures are broken down into the major categories that are represented here on the pie chart. The largest category, obviously, is the right-of-way maintenance at $12.6 million, followed by traffic control, which is at 4.3. The right-of-way maintenance category includes such activities as snow removal, sweeping, pothole filling, and road capital maintenance. The traffic control section includes activities such as traffic signal maintenance, traffic engineering, pedestrian signal maintenance, and pavement markings. I believe last year I covered this with this group, but I think you have some new members. As I explained the categories last year, I will tell you that we do not differentiate the motorized versus non-motorized expenditures here. If we're sweeping the road or plowing the road, the non-motorized infrastructure is maintained along with the road. The same is true for the traffic control section. We treat pedestrian signals the same as we do a motorized signal, and along with RRFBs. So all of those expenses to maintain that right of way is expensed in these categories in the major and local street funds.
And Mark, there are a couple hands raised, but want to bring that to you.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to pause.
Fine. Do you have any more you want to say to this slide before I start calling on people?
I was just going to mention that this little sliver here that is labeled alternative transportation represents the funds that are kicked over to the alternative transportation fund every year automatically, and it represents 5% of the Act 51 revenue. By state statute, we're required to spend 1%, but we far exceed that with this 5% then, and all the other things that I'll show you later on in the presentation. So if we want to go ahead and ask
Dharma?
Yeah, thank you. I wondered on the left-hand graph, what do the different colors mean? What is the blue part and what is the orange part?
Yeah, so the blue represents the major street revenue and the orange is the local street revenue.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're right, though. I should have put that on there. That would have been helpful.
Okay, but the total amount is okay.
Right.
Yeah, all right, sorry. Molly.
Sorry, bad timing. So Transportation Commission last year passed a resolution recommending that we bump up the allocation from the Act 51 funds to the alt transportation fund. We had a recommendation of 20%, and I'm curious whether that recommendation sort of made it into the process, if there's any possibility to increase the alt fund allocation at some point during this process.
I would say for this year, it's not included as part of the recommended budget. However, that being said, certainly council members are allowed to propose amendments to that recommended budget. However, if they are proposing an amendment, they would have to find an offset. Meaning if we're to increase that transfer, something that we're providing in these categories has to be given up. And so they would have to indicate what that would be.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
related to that, Marty, so we made that request, I think a few months ago. It was policy request. Did we just miss the opportunity and that request would be considered next year for next year's proposed budget, or was the request received and still went with 5%? I wasn't sure if we just had bad timing or something.
Yeah, so typically we start working on the budget in January when we first start formulating numbers. So if we would have missed that window, it likely would have been a little bit further too far in the process to backtrack. Not saying that it couldn't have been done, but I don't think it was really. I know that Raymond mentioned it, but I don't believe that it got the appropriate attention that it should have. So I think that is an area where we could perhaps strengthen the communication between what the commission is presenting for policy. But again, that would have to be discussed at a policy level.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. That's good to know. That's something we'll have to keep in mind later into this year to make sure that we re-up that request for next year. Not to say that an amendment couldn't be brought forward by a council member or something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
For this year. One question. So I see the revenue bar chart or something around or a little bit shy of 16 million, but the expenditures are 21 million. Is that discrepancy addressed in later slides by other fund sources, or?
Well, no, that would be ultimately what it represents is there are other revenue streams to this fund other than the weight and gasoline tax.
Okay.
So basically it's spending those other revenue sources. And in this case, it happens to be bond funds.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on now and we'll talk about the alternative transportation a bit. You'll see in this case, the revenue looks a bit odd as far as we're pretty steady and we send over the 5% until we get to fiscal year 21. Fiscal year 21 is the fiscal year in which the Allen Creek Berm project was going on. And the project went over budget. Therefore, in addition to the 5%, the Major Street Fund had to kick in an additional just under $1 million to that project to wrap it up. So this is why you see this spike in fiscal year 21. In fiscal year 22, we go back to the 5%. But then in fiscal year 23, we see another spike, and you see that, the same trajectory as the Act 51 revenue, the 5% that the fund is getting is going up, but also in fiscal year 23, we had planned for some additional cost in this fund due to the protected bike lanes that were installed. Our initial cost to maintain those protected bike lanes was extensive, so we were anticipating higher costs there. So we were throwing in more than the 5% in fiscal year 23, but those costs actually didn't come to fruition as high as we had thought. So we were able to, stay level for the contribution into that fund. On the right side of the screen, you'll see how the expenditures are laid out for this particular budget cycle. The expenses total about $912,000 for fiscal year 24, and they're broken down by the major categories listed here in the pie chart. The largest category here is the $350,000 $262 expense. That's the capital portion of the Alternative Transportation Fund. In this case, the majority of those costs are associated with the Main Street Active Transportation Needs Analysis and the conceptual design, but also includes some crosswalk improvements and safe street facility upgrades. The second largest category is this 290 here, which is dedicated to right-of-way maintenance activities. If you will recall my previous comments about how the right-of-way is accounted for in our normal operations, I mentioned snow plowing and sweeping. We just account for in the major and local street funds. The exception to that is when we have non-motorized facilities that have different maintenance cycles or require specific equipment. So in the case where we've installed these protected bike lanes, we can't do the bike lane when we do the street. So special equipment and special labor goes out, and that type of maintenance is expensed here in the Alternative Transportation Fund. And we're at about just under $300,000 a year to maintain those specialized non-motorized facilities. I can't really see. So are there any questions before I move on to the next one?
I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the next fund that will have significant expenses related to transportation items. It was the street, bridge, and sidewalk millage, repair millage. This fund is forecasted to generate about $14.2 million in revenue in fiscal year 24, which is predominantly, in this case, the millage, just over 2 mills, and an eighth of a mill for the sidewalk portion, which is just about under $1 million for sidewalk repairs. You'll notice this significant increase in fiscal year 22, which I previously mentioned bond proceeds. There are bond proceeds in this fund as well, but you'll also see some other categories previously, which is significant transfers in from other funds. So if engineering is reconstructing a road, they'll often deal with the other infrastructure under the road, the sewers, the water, and those funds will contribute money into that fund to pay for those facilities. On the expense side in this fund, it's about $26.5 million. And once again, we'll be spending bond proceeds. Major expense categories here are obviously the $16.8 million in street resurfacing projects, but other significant projects you will see accomplished through this fund this upcoming cycle is over $6 million for the East Medical Bridge Maintenance Project, $1.2 million in sidewalk and ramp repairs, and also $500,000 in crosswalk and bicycle boulevard improvements.
I've got a question on that slide.
Sure.
The bond proceeds from 22. So are there plans to do that any more in the future? Any other years in the future?
Not currently, no.
Okay.
In addition to weight and gasoline tax, alternative transportation, and the street, bridge, and sidewalk millage, the city also has 3 other millages that make contributions to transportation activities. As indicated here, we have a total of $3.2 million that is generated between the pedestrian allocation of the Washington County mental health millage, the sidewalk construction millage, and finally the newly approved climate action millage. The fiscal year 24 program plans that are funded by those revenue streams are listed here in the slide. You can see in the county mental health millage that just over $500,000 will go to fund the a portion of the streetlight replacement program, crosswalk lighting upgrades, the traffic calming program, and the sidewalk construction millage will fund these various installations of sidewalk And with the new climate millage, the plan that they have to spend that $1.1 million is on uncontrolled crosswalk upgrades, design guidelines, and bike discount program, and some bike lane infrastructure.
Okay, thanks. This is maybe just a mental note for me to Raymond. I'd like to at some point get some more details on the bike discount program. That hasn't started yet, has it?
No, that'll start with the fiscal 24 budget cycle.
That's what I thought. Okay, all right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we've had some preliminary discussions with Missy Stoltz and her team from the Office of Sustainability and Innovation. I think her team is probably going to take lead on that, but we're kind of acting in a support and advisory capacity.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
In addition to the fiscal year 24 proposed budget allocations, we have some funding streams provided by grant proceeds. Just about 1 year ago, almost exactly a year ago, City Council approved an allocation of $2 million of the $24 million of American Rescue Plan funds for the implementation of the Vision Zero plan. It's my understanding that those plans are pending completion of Vision Zero Action Plan by Sam Schwartz. So that project is moving. In addition, the transportation group was successful in acquiring the USDOT Safe Streets and Roads grant at $3.8 million, which they will be funding the speed management pilot as well as further implementation plans for Vision Zero. So we have a total of $6.5 million in active grants currently. All right. Okay. So if we take a look at all of the categories that we have planned for this upcoming fiscal year, we like to put it all in one spot so that it makes it puts everything in one place. So we have an idea of the investment we're making in active transportation in the fiscal year. So with various funding sources and various activities happening over the course of the next fiscal year, we're planning to invest, and we have budgeted over $6.5 million. So that doesn't include any of the grant funds or proceeds that we have, but we are investing a significant amount in active transportation items this coming fiscal year.
Any questions from anyone?
Okay. And as I previously mentioned, we have
hold on real quick. I see Deborah's got a question.
Sorry, I think this was appeared somewhere else, but can you tell me how that $6.5 million planned for fiscal year 24 compares to prior years?
I can, but not off the top of my head. I would have to, we kind of do this every year. So I'd have to go back over the previous presentations, and I can certainly send that on to Raymond and Chris, and they can just disperse it to the commission. But yeah, I should be able to pull that easily.
Thank you.
Sure.
And this slide, that's from all funding sources, right?
Yes, all funding sources with the exception of the grants that I just spoke about.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. As I previously mentioned on the street, bridge, and sidewalk millage slide, we're making a significant investment in roads this fiscal year. That is an investment of $25 million that continues to go towards supporting the goal of achieving 80% of roads in good or better condition by 2026. Again, similar to active transportation, road work is funded by various funding sources, including those listed here. And we also like to coordinate projects with internal and external groups, including MDOT, U of M, DTE, and the Downtown Development Authority, to name a few. And finally, again, in this year's budget, we are supporting the sidewalk snow clearance pilot program. This is the second year of the program. The first year, we didn't see a whole lot of activity. So We continue to support this program to see if we can get some traction. Again, the weather was heavy and light and a little bit all over the place. So we're giving this another go to see if we can get some legs under this program, but that remains something that we're committed to and is funded in the upcoming budget cycle. So that concludes what I have to present this evening, but I'm happy to answer any further questions that you might have.
Molly?
Yeah, so if I'm remembering correctly, in last year's budget, Erica put forward an amendment to fund some quick build, like some traffic calming quick build projects.
I think that was 2 years ago, actually.
Oh, that was 2 years ago?
I think that was in 21's budget or 22's budget, sorry. Isn't that right, Raymond?
That was,
yeah, I think that was amendment number 9 of the budget, if I recall correctly, yeah.
Did those get done?
Some of them did. So for example, some of the pavement markings at like, what is it? Maple and Miller, for example, some bike lane improvements around Liberty were done, but the things that didn't go in were some of those vertical devices because we were waiting to get that sweeping equipment. So we actually bought some of those materials and they're just waiting to be installed until we get the sweeping equipment. There was also some pavement marking contract things that we ran into late last construction season, but yeah, some went in, and then I can refer you back to those projects identified through the Vision Zero Implementation Committee.
Okay, because then my next question was, in the absence of ongoing funding for quick builds, are one of these buckets, does that include more quick builds? Like one of the, it's not called out specifically, it does. Yeah, we have actually, Marty touched on, I think, 2 of the big ones. There's $2 million of the ARPA funds. Some of that is going to quick build. Then we also got the Safe Streets for All, which has another $2 million for quick builds. And then I wouldn't be surprised that if the climate millage, which is allocating roughly $1 million annually moving forward, will go towards quick builds in a more sustaining and long-term nature as well. All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions on the budget presentation? All right, well, thank you very much, Marty, for coming in and sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you next year. All right, well, with that, we'll move on to the next information item on the agenda, which is the shared micromobility discussion with SPIN with Jimmy Gilman. So we're joined by Jimmy Gilman of SPIN, who will give an overview of their operation of e-scooters and e-bikes now in Ann Arbor, and also along the way answer any questions that you all have. So let's do the same rules, just raise your hand and we'll call on you as the questions come up. So we have Jimmy. Is he
Yes, I'm here. Can you all see the screen share here? Just want to
it says loading. Yep.
Oh, perfect. Can you just give me a thumbs up when it has loaded, when you can see the screen here?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, let me introduce myself while that is loading. So first and foremost, thank you to the commission for having me today. So my name is Jimmy Gilman. I lead government partnerships for SPIN Central Region, including the city of Ann Arbor, and really excited just to chat about our programming. I know that the newest piece of our programming is our e-bike program that we deployed within the past couple of weeks. So I'd love just to touch on a little bit of our background in Ann Arbor, some programming that we're incorporating right now, including the e-bike program, some equity programming as well, and keeping this conversational as well. So if any of y'all have questions, feel free to jump in either with a raised hand or at the end, we can open up dialogue as well. So look forward to just chatting about our program. And can y'all see, has this loaded?
Still loading.
Still says loading. Okay.
And Jimmy,
what's that, Raymond?
Oh, Jimmy, just a heads up, your bookmarks is still up on the presentation. You might want to minimize that one.
Okay.
I don't know if that's like intentional or not.
No, on my screen, I have, let's see. On my screen, I have presentation view up.
All right, now it says screen sharing, but it's all black. Oh,
Let me retry this from the beginning here. Apologies for the delay.
no problem.
And Jimmy, if you have any, if you continue to have difficulty, assuming this
Here we go.
presentation is the same. There, yep, you're good.
That good now? I guess we
Yeah,
just need to hit the power off and power on button, the age-old trick.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, with that, I'll jump into some program background. So we've been operating SPIN, that is, in the city of Ann Arbor and at University of Michigan since the spring of 2019. And again, have a formal partnership both with the city and the university, splitting our vehicles equally between the city and the university. And during that time, we've seen more than 630,000 trips on SPIN micromobility devices. For context, that's somewhere in the 100 plus range of metric tons of carbon dioxide avoided from being emitted to the atmosphere based on replacing car trips. So I think it's helpful thinking about the scale of a program, looking back a few years and really putting into numbers the impact and the amount of ridership that we've seen in Ann Arbor on devices. So really just wanted to start with some of that context and background. And SPIN since that time in 2019 has really grown as a company in a lot of ways as well. First and foremost, one thing that has been a major change for us is a partnership with Berlin-based Tier Mobility. Tier is the largest micromobility provider in Europe, operating in 22 countries across Europe and the Middle East, and 300 plus different municipalities. And together, the SPIN Tier company is the largest micromobility provider in the world, we collectively. So I really like to just mention that to talk about how much we've learned from our European counterparts who may be a couple of years ahead of micromobility in the North American context, and how much they've learned from us as well. But really putting us in a position to continue to scale impact together on a global scale, providing a sustainable and accessible transportation form. Specifically in the context of Ann Arbor, we've already expanded upon our initial fleet of e-scooters in the city and at the university. Early iterations of our program, we had fleet numbers of 200 to 250 vehicles split evenly between the city and the university. Right now, we have 400 e-scooters and 100 e-bikes, which I'll chat more about in some subsequent slides. So really have about doubled the fleet of vehicles out there and have continued to see that ridership and demand. More vehicles out there in the fleet is actually, we've seen increases in number of rides per vehicle over the past several years. So something that we hope to continue to see that trend, working with our partners at the city and at the university to continue to build the program and see strong ridership on the vehicles. We've also used our Ann Arbor program as a model in terms of developing partnerships with other cities, and also our partnership with the university to develop partnerships at other universities as well in the state of Michigan, including in Ypsilanti and Eastern Michigan University, Lansing and East Lansing, and Michigan State. And our newest program, which we'll be launching actually probably within the next several weeks in Mount Pleasant and at Central Michigan University. So really what we've learned in Ann Arbor, in our partnership with the city, in our partnership with the university, and just in our deployment of our operations, we've been able to take to other communities in Michigan and really scale impact of establishing a micromobility system to, again, provide that accessible and sustainable mode and filling in those last mile gaps that are so needed in cities across North America. So without further ado, I'd love to chat a little bit about our e-bike program that I'm sure many members of the commission are curious about, something that we launched just over 2 weeks ago, and super excited to report on our e-bikes, on our e-bike programming, and just some of the initial data that we've seen thus far in Ann Arbor. So as I mentioned, the launch date of e-bikes was April 1st, 2023, and have deployed 100 e-bikes shared evenly between the city and the university, in addition to the fleet of 400 e-scooters that we already have deployed. And you can see some pictures here of some familiar faces that you all may know testing out the e-bikes during our ribbon cutting ceremony. So really excited to offer multimodal options. There are a lot of benefits, I think, of both e-scooters and e-bikes separately as different modes existing in dockless micromobility. Some of those that I'll chat about in some of the following slides here. In terms of some of the specifications of our e-bike, there's a longer list that I list here on the right side that I can share with y'all just to see what all of the components are and some of the highlights of it. What I like to chat about some of these key components on the left here. First and foremost, a swappable battery with up to 100 miles of range. The swappable aspect of this is a game changer. Micromobility devices, both in terms of e-bikes and e-scooters, are moving to that swappable battery model. Our entire fleet here in Ann Arbor is now is swappable, which means we can take batteries to our e-bikes and e-scooters in the fields, swap out the dead battery, put in a fresh battery, and then move from vehicle to vehicle, rather than picking up all of our e-bikes or e-scooters, bringing them back to a warehouse and having to take multiple rounds back and forth to conduct our charging. So it really reduces the vehicle miles traveled of our operations and our vans out there in the fields, and something that's a major win from a sustainability perspective. And these batteries on the e-bikes have up to 100 miles of range, which is a really big number for any of y'all that may own personal e-bikes or just were familiar with early iterations of micromobility. We had scooters back at our impetus as a company that their mileage range would be about 3 to 5 miles. So really getting up to that 100 number is a huge win, allows multiple trips to be taken on these vehicles and longer trips for longer commutes or recreation riding, specifically on e-bikes.
I have a quick question.
So yeah, go for it.
So they're dockless, obviously, but do you guys, the company redistributes them around the city, I'm assuming?
Correct. So we say, rebalancing is the industry jargon that we use. So we'll pick up vehicles that either are, have not been ridden in a day or let's say 36 hours. We'll filter by that to make sure we're picking up the vehicles and redeploying those at proper parking locations. Or if we ever receive a notice that a vehicle has been improperly parked by a user or someone has tipped it over, we'll filter by that as well within our internal ops system to pick that vehicle up, round up any incidents of those vehicles, and redeploy them in a specific spot. And some other highlights of our specifications on the e-bikes here are puncture-proof tires. So these tires are foam-filled, not inflated, so we never have issues with flats, but still have the same performance as inflatable tires. The e-bikes also have an adjustable seat and a basket with 25 pounds of capacity. So for folks who are taking longer trips, that ability to adjust a seat and sit on a micromobility mode, as well as that basket in the front for folks who have cargo, is a really appealing use case for e-bikes, and something that I'll mention later in our rider feedback that we've heard thus far as well. One other component here is a wireless charger and phone holder on the dashboard of the vehicle. From a practicality perspective, it allows users to charge as they are going from spot to spot, which we've heard a lot of positive feedback from folks. And from a safety perspective, it can also double as hands-free GPS navigation to navigate from spot to spot while riding e-bikes, rather than holding a phone in hand or pulling a phone out while going from spot to spot. Being able to have that on the dashboard in a hands-free capacity. So I like to mention that feature again, both from a practicality and a safety lens, and something that we've heard a lot of positive feedback about. And I have some very initial trip statistics to share with you all here. I think these need to be taken with a grain of salt, just because we're so early in the program. And a lot of what we've been seeing is just folks trying out the e-bikes as a new vehicle mode, getting accustomed to them, doing shorter trips on them just to try them as a new option. And to decode a little bit here on these graphs, A80 is our internal naming for our e-bikes, and these 9bot Max version 2.2 is our internal naming for our scooters, just to decode that a bit. So on this graph in the top left, this is showing total number of rides per vehicle per day deployed in the fleet. You can see it's been fairly comparable thus far in terms of trips per vehicle per day. We see a couple of spikes towards the beginning here where e-bikes were outpacing e-scooters. We see a couple of peaks on the right side more recently where e-scooters have outpaced e-bikes. But overall, that trips per vehicle number pulled for the last 2 weeks has been fairly comparable. I'm interested to see what that looks like moving forward. Generally, what our data shows is more trips, but shorter trips on e-scooters and slightly less frequent, but longer trips on e-bikes, suggesting either longer commutes or recreational use for e-bikes specifically, and shorter last mile hop on, hop off trips for e-bikes. So I'm curious to see what that data shows as we move into future weeks and months of the program. And again, on the bottom right here, you can see our average trip lengths, as I just mentioned. Right now, they show very similar. Again, my hypothesis there and what we've seen in some other programs is in the first couple weeks, folks taking shorter trips on the e-bikes just to test them out as a mode, unlocking one, taking it on a short lap around the neighborhood, or from just a short test ride to become acquainted with the mode. So I would expect, and I can report numbers back to the commission, that these e-bike trip lengths would become longer compared to e-scooter trip lengths in the future. But just wanted to report on what we're seeing, at least in the first couple of weeks here. You can see a heat map here as well of trip starts for our e-bikes. This is obviously very initial, a lot of trips happening in downtown and towards the university, but trip starts throughout different parts of the city as well. One thing that we hope to do is expand deployment and ridership in all parts of the city to offer this as an accessible service, no matter the geography or where one lives. So I would expect, these trip starts that we are seeing further away from downtown and other neighborhoods of the city to further populate and to see a lot more evidence of trip starts throughout the city here. But again, wanted to report back on at least what we've seen in the first couple of weeks of the program. And I've sort of intertwined rider feedback and what we've heard thus far throughout the presentation, but would love to just chat about a couple of points in particular. So again, a determined or a definite use case for e-bikes for longer commutes and recreation opportunities during our ribbon cutting ceremony. I know our general manager was hearing a lot of that feedback. We've been hearing that from our staff or listening to folks in the fields who are excited about this mode, thinking about taking longer commutes or trips that involve cargo as well. So that's been in other programs and just e-bikes in general, something that we've heard and something that has been echoed by folks who are using the service here in Ann Arbor as well. And again, that excitement surrounding the hands-free navigation and the mobile phone charging capacity is something that has really struck folks as well. So a feature that we're excited to bring, and I know folks are noticing as a real value add for them. At this point, I want to pivot a bit and chat about our equity programming in Ann Arbor as well. Something that sort of in conjunction with this launch of e-bikes, we've been trying to push as well, just to break down barriers of lack of information of what resources are available. And I'll touch on that a bit in our next slide here. So we offer what we call our SPIN Access program to residents of Ann Arbor. So for any folks who are enrolled in government benefits programs, they can apply for SPIN Access on our website, uploading an identification form and any proof of enrollment in government services programs. This discount when enrolled in the program is at least 50%. I think right now we actually on our pricing have it's closer to about a 70% discount off of trips. So something that really breaks down economic barriers to allow folks from different socioeconomic backgrounds to access and use our service. For folks who may not have a smartphone or maybe unbanked, we also have a cash card option is what we call it. So folks can buy these cards who are enrolled in our Spin Access program, can unlock a bike or a scooter that is in front of them by texting the serial number of that vehicle to our customer support team and the code on the cash card that they've purchased to remotely unlock the vehicle in that way. And then when arriving at a destination, can text lock and then lock the vehicle up at that spot. So again, our Spin Access program is focused on removing as many barriers as possible, whether that be economic barriers, technology barriers of access to a smartphone. So really providing access to as many folks and reaching as many residents with micromobility as possible. And I think another barrier is just an understanding that this service exists among many folks. And we're trying to develop more partnerships with different actors in the city to really distribute that information and find some different channels through which we can distribute info on and information regarding eligibility for our Spin Access program. One of those channels is a partnership with the City of Ann Arbor Housing Commission to connect with affordable housing communities and affordable housing service providers to offer automatic eligibility for enrollment for folks who live in low-income housing communities to enroll in our Spin Access program. So we've seen an uptick in our Spin Access enrollment through this partnership, something that we hope to continue to push out this narrative through different information campaigns, which we've already started with the City of Ann Arbor Housing Commission and other actors associated, and something that we can hopefully have a regular cadence with to, again, expand access, break down that knowledge gap of what services exist, and hopefully find other actors in the city as well through which to distribute this information so that folks know about this as an option. So again, something that we're really excited in conjunction sort of with rolling out e-bikes to continue to distribute information about. Would love if anyone has any feedback specifically on how we can continue to distribute this narrative about our Spin Access program. But with that, I'll conclude my presentation and take any points of feedback, whether it be on that programming, our programming in general, and really just appreciate you all taking the time to have me speak today.
Great, thank you, Jimmy. We have a few minutes for some questions. Julie?
Hi, thanks for that presentation. Do you have any data on use by people with a cash pass and other metrics for underserved populations?
Yeah, this is something that I hope I want to start sharing more. I don't have it in front of me now because this has been a recent push to really establish the program and enroll more folks in the program. I know this is something that I've chatted with Raymond about, as well as reporting on those statistics on sort of a monthly cadence to see the progress or other ways that we can reach folks to enroll in the program. So I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. I can follow up with those, and something that I plan to share on a specific cadence moving forward to make sure that we really are enrolling folks and make sure that we are getting that information out there. So thank you for the question. And yeah, it's something that as we're sort of initiating, haven't necessarily tracked yet thus far, but have means to moving forward and intentions to moving forward.
Just as a follow-up, are you thinking of kind of strategically about places where bikes should be dropped off when they're moved around the city so that different subpopulations have access to them?
Absolutely. And that was a big conversation during our conversation with the Housing Commission, just to chat more about how we can distribute vehicles to the full extent of the city, and where there are folks that may be enrolling in our Spin Access program, and how we can match geographic deployment points to some of those locations. So definitely a narrative that has been a point of discussion, really a point of emphasis on our part. And as we sort of add more and more vehicles to the program, reaching different geographies throughout the city and having a saturation of number of vehicles that folks know that they can find a vehicle within, a quarter mile of where they are, a greater saturation of those vehicles really has been a byproduct of addition of more vehicles to the fleet. So something that we're hearing feedback on, something that we're hoping to respond to, and adding these e-bikes to the fleet is making it easier operationally as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
All right, Molly.
Thanks. Yeah, this was really interesting. I had I had the same question as Julie and other related questions. So is the access program, is that something that Spin has rolled out sort of everywhere? Is this something that you're piloting here in Ann Arbor? Like, what's the scale of that project?
We do have it available in most of our programs in the United States. The specific strategic partnership with the Housing Commission to distribute that information through different channels of affordable housing service providers is something specific to here in Ann Arbor. The cash card feature of unlocking remotely for folks without a smartphone is available in a few programs across the country. I would say probably less than a quarter, but something that we wanted to bring specifically to Ann Arbor based on some of the feedback that we had heard from folks who are unbanked or folks who may not have access to a smartphone. So that is something we have, again, rolled out in a few programs, but is more unique to Ann Arbor, just to make sure that we're targeting different folks and responding to some of that feedback.
So thanks, that's helpful.
Sure.
Another sort of technical question. How long does text to unlock take versus the standard unlocking method?
It should be in real time. So you can text to our support team and those go to the top of our queue of our support team to unlock in real time. We've seen sometimes, if someone is in a lower number of bars in a certain, cell area, it can take, 30 seconds to a minute or something like that to unlock, but generally in real time for that unlock to happen.
And it's an actual human who has to unlock it on the other side.
On our support side of things. Yep.
Thanks.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Peter.
Following up on the text to unlock, are there a lot of people who don't have a smartphone who do have a non-smartphone that can text with? Like, it seems like the same barrier to owning a smartphone would also prevent you from owning a regular phone that you can text with. So I'm just wondering if you have some sense about that. Thank you.
It's a good question. We have sold a handful of those text unlock cards in Ann Arbor. We also, and I'll be fully transparent, realize it's not a catch-all solution. It's something that can expand access to folks who do have a phone, but a non-smartphone option. Or again, folks who may not have a bank account who can use cash currency to purchase one of those cards. So folks who have a smartphone but not access to a bank account, that would still be an option for them. So we've sold a few. I think there are other things that we could possibly incorporate in the city of Ann Arbor, like a delivery system of devices to a specific area for folks who could call in, could email, could have other options to start a ride. We've piloted some of those systems in other cities to continue to break down those barriers. So my answer is yes, we've seen use of it. Is it a perfect solution? No, but it's something that I think we can use as a building block for moving forward.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Megan?
Yeah, I think I kind of had the same question about potentially other solutions beyond, like, I think the access card is like you're saying, a step. I would be curious if there are other options down the line, maybe that like you hear feedback about eventually. I think ultimately just wanted to say like thanks for talking to us. I really appreciated really interested in like even early data. So just hope to continue to see use of these things and appreciate the slides and the data.
Perfect. Thank you for appreciate the words and the feedback. And really in general, I think, we're excited to have bolstered the programming here, but the program here and just micromobility in general, there's a lot that we can continue to build on, whether it be, adaptive devices for folks of different ability levels or comfort levels to use micromobility, delivery systems to further break down different ways that folks can reach us to have a vehicle delivered to them to use in a specific way. So things that we've already started some preliminary conversations, I know with Raymond and others, and just really look forward to taking the steps that we have taken and building on those into the future too.
That's related to what I was going to ask Jimmy. Is there a way other than by virtue of where you drop off the vehicle or pick up a vehicle, is there a way for people to register a desire for them to be distributed in a way, in their area or an area of interest?
Yes, it's not necessarily in real time at the moment. So folks can call our customer support team and request, hey, I live at so-and-so address. Would you be able to deploy at corner of so-and-so street where there's, sufficient right of way regularly at this location so that I can use vehicles. So we have taken that feedback on sort of more of a operational and programmatic scale of adding that as a regular deployment point for us. In terms of delivering in real time, it's not something that really we can offer support just in terms of our customer support structure at the moment, but adding a specific spot and hearing feedback from the community as having that as a regular deployment spot for us when we are conducting those sweeps and rebalances is something that we've carried out here for sure.
Okay, but there isn't like a button in your app where you can say like, it would be nice if there was one here and okay. And
not at the moment, but it's good feedback. And it's something that we've sort of piloted with like adaptive programs of, hey, can I have a vehicle dropped here at this time for me to use today? Or with our regular scooter programming. In terms of how our support team is set up right now, it's a little bit more complicated to have it in real time, but things that we piloted a bit in some other programs.
And then big picture wise, your company has 400 scooters and 100 e-bikes around the city. How does Spin judge the success of the program in Ann Arbor? Adding e-bikes is encouraging. Are you guys looking to add or reduce or stay the same in terms of numbers and the service you provide in the future? I see, average of 1 to 2 trips a day per vehicle. How does that compare to other cities? Is that considered good or lacking? Just looking to get an idea of what the medium term future holds for your service in our city.
Yeah, great question. So generally we see our sweet spot is sort of 1.1 trips per vehicle per day is sort of our sweet spot that we measure a balanced market in equilibrium, you might say. That generally suggests that there are enough vehicles out there to reach saturation in different geographies in the city and provide access for the demand that is there for folks. But if we were to go below that number, maybe there are too many vehicles out there that are sitting and are not getting used regularly. If we go above that number, and actually here in Ann Arbor, I think our average on the year is closer to about 1.7 to 2 trips per vehicle per day, suggesting that this program could incorporate more micromobility devices to reach the demand that exists in different geographies in the city. So again, using that benchmark, and every city is different, right, in terms of what it looks like. But that 1.1 number, just over 1 trip per vehicle per day, is generally what we're shooting for to make sure that we're maintaining access, but we're not just having vehicles around that aren't getting used at different spots. So from sort of an operational and metric standpoint, that's generally what we're looking for. So in looking in just comparison to some of our other programs, Ann Arbor has one of our higher, probably top 20% of our programs in terms of that number of trips per vehicle per day right now, which suggests there could be, in addition to the fleet, and that would gain or give access to a greater number of folks in the city that are demanding the service.
Does Ann Arbor see a larger than average variation seasonally, especially with students and the summer, and then also the winter weather effect?
Yeah, so I would say end of spring and end of summer, early fall, at times when students are in session, are probably our highest ridership times. So in, April, May, and then August through October. That being said, we do have some programs where when students are not in session, we don't really see any ridership. That's not the case in Ann Arbor. We still see about that one trip per vehicle per day, even in the summertime. Even into the winter, there are some markets which we hibernate, we say, for the winter time, where we pull the fleet in. But we have the fleet out in Ann Arbor, and folks still do ride throughout the winter, generally lower seasonally. But we still see ridership, and the demand is still there. So there are those seasonal fluctuations compared to all of our programs as a whole. But compared to our other mixed city and campus programs, we actually see less variation specifically to that program profile, if that makes sense.
That's I learned a lot of interesting stuff there. Any other questions from anyone else? All right. Well, thank you so much, Jimmy, and thanks for the questions. I think with that, we'll move on to the next topic.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thanks again for coming. All right. So next up, we have the equitable engagement topic. Heather Seyfarth will give an overview of the city's equitable engagement initiative and also, of course, answer any questions that we might have. So, Heather, I think if you need to share your screen or whatever you need to do, floor is yours.
Great. I'll get my screen sharing. And I don't know if Jimmy has already left, but I do want to let you know that I'm new at the Housing Commission and have a little bit of background in transportation planning as well. So I'd love to be added to your list of contacts already at the Housing Commission to help you work on this. So this is really exciting what you're working on.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Heather, for mentioning that. And let's definitely connect afterwards.
Okay, great. All right. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Well, those are really two tough acts to follow up. So thank you for that, Raymond. But I am happy to be here to talk about the Equitable Engagement Initiative. To give a little bit of background about myself, my name is Heather Seyfarth. My background is in urban planning as well as social work, which is what led me to this equitable engagement work. And I've just recently shifted over to the Housing Commission, which I mentioned. I've been there for about a month. So now I'm the Director of Housing and Economic Development over there. But when I was doing this equitable engagement work, I served in a group called Systems Planning and primarily did engagement work, also worked on some long-range planning initiatives like the Tree Line Trail, was also tasked with the center of the city as well. So to jump into it, the project's goal is really to help us as an organization, as a governmental entity, as well as a community as a whole, live up to our desire to be equitable and inclusive. Those of us who are in the engagement game really feel that equitable engagement is key to this. So what we sought to do is to work with residents and not the usual residents that come to our meetings. And I'll share a little bit more information on that a little bit later. But really hearing from a broad perspective of residents to develop a shared understanding of what equity means and what policies, guidelines, and practices we could implement to help us be the inclusive city that we want to be. So when we set out to do this work, we realized that staff really needed to get grounded first. So we needed some time to educate ourselves. So prior to an external launch, we spent some time researching promising practices from other communities. So looking what other communities were doing, and then looked at existing conditions. So where are we at really? In addition to that, we looked at what we are already doing, which is includes the community engagement toolkit, which has been around for a number of years, but isn't consistently applied. So we wanted staff to take a look at that and see what was working, why not everybody was using it. We also looked at our demographic data collection, and I'm going to show you some statistics on that in just a moment. We started collecting demographic data in 2019 just to get a baseline of who was engaging with us. So it was a little bit before the pandemic started, and then of course after the pandemic. So it's a little bit skewed because most of our data is from online activity. We also started doing staff training just as this was beginning. So we hired a group. There's an agency called International Association of Public Participation that provides trainings on how to do good public participation. So we started staff training on that. We also had a youth engagement effort, and the city has done youth engagement efforts throughout the ages. But the most recent one is actually an appendix you'll see in the report. And this involved actually doing a class with community high school. So it brought students over from community high school and taught them basically how to engage with the city. So how does the city operate? Gave them a baseline on a variety of topics, and then just tried to instill in them that they had a right to give their input on the plans that we're making today, which affect them as adults tomorrow. And then we also talked about our developer public participation requirement, which is something that we do as new development comes in, which is a little bit above and beyond what other communities do. So the demographic data that we were collecting, this is what it shows, that primarily who's engaging with us. So we have what you'll see here, the blue you'll see our survey respondents. And those are people that attended our events either in person when it was before the pandemic or online, or took surveys from us. And it wasn't a requirement, it was completely optional. We can't really force people to take demographic surveys, but those who chose to participate, and many people did, this is what it showed in comparison to the census data, is that we are basically getting a lot of white, wealthy, older homeowners that are coming to our meetings. This is something that we intuitively knew, but this really shows us that that's what was happening. So thus the steering committee was born, and we didn't want to get the usual suspects with this. So we put out a call through some of our standard channels like social media, Twitter, Nextdoor, Facebook. Also did some flyers. We are finding more and more that flyers are a good way to go. And I know it seems old fashioned, but physical flyers around town actually attract people that we don't normally get because it'll get past people that are just passing by. So we put flyers around town. We sent them out to housing commission sites. We went through Meals on Wheels. So people who were receiving meals from Wheels were getting flyers and that. We did a community newsletter. We did email distribution list. We did a press release. We also went through our schools, which is a really good outlet to get things going through the youth and then getting to the parents. And then we also created a video PSA on public television. So with that, we actually got 80 applicants, which is more than we thought we would, and more than we thought we could handle, because we really just wanted a steering committee. We ended up narrowing it down to 30 representatives, which is still really large for a steering committee, but we just didn't want to narrow it any further. There were just so many good applicants, and an obvious desire from the community to participate in something like this. So with those 30 representatives that were chosen, we met monthly for 1.5 years. We worked on defining equity and our core values, and then developed recommendations, which I'll get to at the end of this presentation. So the equity definition that the group came up with is this: the fair and just practices that ensure all community members can thrive. Equitable practices acknowledge and address structural inequities, historic and current, that advantage some and disadvantage others. And that's, of course, distinguished from equality, which means treating everyone as if their experiences are the same. So the committee started meeting, and I had initially put together this plan of what we were going to talk about at every meeting, and it had a really linear path. And what I quickly realized is we couldn't really be on a linear path. We really had to honor where participants were coming from and the things that were hitting them the hardest, the things that they needed to talk about. Each meeting, we actually spent a lot of time at the beginning doing icebreaker questions and kind of getting to know you type questions, as well as just having some time to share what was in our mind and in our hearts, just because there's so much going on in the world related to equity that was heartbreaking, and people just needed space to process it. So that was the beginning of every meeting. And then we just took various turns addressing topics that the group wanted to talk about, which you'll see just kind of took us all over the place. I had originally thought we were just going to talk about specifically about engagement, but what became apparent is that we can't just talk about engagement. We have to talk about these other topics and dive into them a little bit deeper before we can talk about engagement related to any of this. So one of the first sessions that we had was going over the opportunity index, and Teresa Gelati from the county walked through that with us. If you don't know about the opportunity index, I do encourage you to take a look at that. It's on the county's website, but it's a mapping resource that shows areas that have greater opportunity than others. We reviewed the demographic data of the engagement participants, which was the data that I just showed you, and had discussions about that, what that meant. We looked at the engagement toolkit that the city has been using and picked that apart, looked at what was working, what wasn't working, what can be improved. We reflected on engagement efforts that we were in process of. At that time, we were doing the American Rescue Plan Act funding effort. And so we picked that apart, looked at the good, the bad, and the ugly with that. And also another prominent one was the water treatment plant project. So that project is looking at improvements to our water treatment plant, and some of the committee members got really involved with that. And so we talked about that. We also got into land use planning. So Brett Leonard was a part of this, and he was gracious and spent a lot of time talking about land use planning. We looked at affordable housing. All came and talked to the group about affordable housing. City hiring practices, that was a really big one for the group, with the sentiment that the city's staff doesn't reflect the of the community. We looked at sustainability efforts, and then of course we looked at the building blocks of meaningful engagement. We also did some field trips. This is one of them. This is out to the water treatment plant. This is a graphic that the group came up with. We didn't end up putting this in the report, but I really kind of liked it. It's this paw idea that we need strong footing and engagement to be able to address the toes here, which are these various topics that I've been talking about: hiring practices, accessibility, mobility, housing development decisions, and so on. So how does engagement influence the toes? So that really brings me to the recommendations, which I'm going to just go over with. And you have the report, and I do encourage you to spend time reading through it, because I'm just going to hit basically the strategies, but there are some action steps under the strategies in the report. So the first recommendation is to demonstrate that the committee is, demonstrate that the city is committed to advancing equity. And the reason behind this is that people who have been minoritized and marginalized will not engage with the city if the city is not representative or clearly committed to supporting equity. So with that, people wanted to show that the city intentionally hires individuals, hires minoritized individuals, especially in higher level positions, create transparent and meaningful pathways for promotion of minoritized individuals, appoint racially and ethnically minoritized candidates representing impacted community perspective to boards and commissions. And and that city council adopts and enforces policies that ensure decision-making is equitable. And there are some example policy statements in the report there. And then to be authentic, which I know seems kind of vague, but really it's the sentiment about being sincere, not dancing around a topic, but coming to the table and saying what you mean. And then building trust and transparency through continuous outreach and relationship building. So recommendation 2 is to provide both ample and targeted invitations to engagement opportunities. And this is basically because people need to be made aware of opportunities in addition to feeling welcome and valued at engagement events. So it's not enough just to make sure that we're getting the word out. Once people are there, we need to make sure that they feel that this is a meaningful effort. So under that, we have the strategies of translate and transcreate, which is adapting a message from one language to another while maintaining its intent, style, and tone and context. Meeting notices and content addressing the most commonly spoken languages at first. The second one is, in addition to social media and email, use non-digital ways of getting the word out, such as flyers, which I mentioned earlier. Word of mouth is really big when it's, it really helps when it's coming from a trusted source. Door hangers and other things like that, including postings at community hubs, such as community centers, libraries, and schools. Getting the word out through places like religious institutions, barbershops, bus stops, and informal networks. And then actively recruiting Black, Indigenous, and people of color to participate in engagement events. So not being passive about it, but really making an effort. And then creating an online engagement hub that is easy to find and easy to use. Right now, engagement notices online are just kind of scattered all over the place. So we really want to bring those to one centralized location online. Recommendation 3 is to develop community engagement plans with care. The purpose behind this is that community engagement plans are the blueprint for ensuring quality, equitable engagement. And under this, we have provide the resources necessary for staff to conduct meaningful engagement. So in the past, and this is not unique to Ann Arbor or planning projects in general, often community engagement is sort of an add-on to it. And so what we're asking is to really centralize community engagement and provide the resources necessary. So that might involve paying people to participate, providing meals, things like that. And then the fourth recommendation is to make community engagement events more accessible and attractive. And the purpose behind this is that engagement events that are not easy to access, seem unimportant, or feel hostile deter people from engaging. So under this, we have offer hybrid meeting options. We did find that during the pandemic that did bring other people out, in part because it was easier. You can be in your pajamas, you can have your kids, running around you, you can eat your dinner. So that's helpful. So we don't want to give up our online opportunities, but we do also want to have in-person opportunities. So we're looking at different hybrid options going forward. Provide various ways for people to provide their input, ways that avoid dominant people and narratives from taking over the meeting. So what we want to avoid are those old-fashioned town hall type meetings where it's one person that comes up to the podium at a time. That can really shut a lot of people out. So we look at different formats. Some of them are open houses, charrettes, things like that, or different ways for people to put in input, which can be written, kind of catering to more introverted people versus extroverted people. And also children, just kind of people who haven't typically felt the opportunity to have a voice. Hold meetings at various times. So in the past, we have often done it in the evening, going with the idea that people have traditional working schedules, but people have all sorts of different working schedules. And again, during the pandemic, we found that lunchtime meetings were actually really good if we were doing them online, that people could just join doing that, and then some morning meetings too. Record meetings, people really like the recorded meetings because you can go back and see what was said verbatim. It helps with transparency. Hold people to the golden rule standards. I mean, that, it seems kind of, it's basic, I guess, but truly just hold people to treating people like they would want to be treated. So we are trying to use and enforce ground rules that support honoring the dignity of people. Understand that the community's time and energy is valuable, especially for people with limited resources. Compensate participants in some way, such as with food or stipends or gift certificates. Hire trained and continue to train meeting facilitators and moderators in fields such as social work, psychology, diversity, equity, inclusion, public participation, etc. Create space to listen to and heal old wounds using highly trained engagement facilitators. So really just looking at kind of the history of our city, the history of many cities, and things that like segregation that occurred, that the government was involved in, and acknowledging that, not just talking around it. And then taking time to celebrate and experience joy as a community. So we don't really do that a whole lot, when we get to the end of things. Often we just have these contentious public meetings, but really we need to also have times where we're having joy together and bonding in that way. And then finally, when a decision is made, clearly communicate that what the decision is, the decision-making process, and who ultimately makes the decision, and the level of influence the community can have over the decision. So in the past, we've often just kind of fell off where a decision is made and then we don't really get back to the community about it. So we want to make sure that we do circle back with the community and explain exactly how their input influenced it and what decision was made. So going back to promising practices, I noted earlier that we as staff had looked at these promising practices, and I did want to just highlight a couple of these, which we're likely to move forward on because they're lower hanging fruit. One of them is to do community liaisons. So this is potentially an extension of the Equitable Engagement Committee and members of their network. So actually paying people to participate in projects that we're doing that can serve as representatives. Measure participant satisfaction. So this is easy enough to do, sending out surveys or just kind of checking in, at different increments throughout a project just to get the pulse of the community and how people are feeling. Doing the mix of meeting styles, which I mentioned earlier. Information kiosks, so putting those around the community, not just in the downtown, but really at the edges of the city and other places where people can go and find information. So this is going back to something that we learned over and over again, is that we can't keep expecting people to come to us. We really need to get out to people, and informational kiosks can be helpful with that. Surveys and polling, people really tend to like our surveys. I think because it's easy enough to do, you can access it online on your phone. I worry a little bit about just sending out too many surveys. I'm waiting for people to get really sick of doing them, and for that to start sliding. But right now, people are really liking doing online surveys. And then the engagement hub. So during this process, we worked with a team of U of M students to explore our engagement online presence. And so they worked with us assessing where we were at. We did put together just kind of a temporary engagement hub, but we want to do something bigger and better than that. This is an example of where we're headed with it. This is Pittsburgh. We want something to be really interactive, really visual, make it easier. What they have on here is what's called cards. So it shows a picture of the project and then gives a synopsis of it, and then you can click at the bottom, learn more, and it shows you different ways to be engaged. So ours might not exactly look like this, but you can see that this is better than right now. We just kind of have a listing of projects, or it's just kind of around on different sites on our website, or different pages on our website. So we would like to do something like this. And then finally, going back to the idea of celebrating, this was sort of the conclusion of our Equitable Engagement Committee that just happened the other week. We had a potluck where we got together and talked about our journey and where things were headed. I would say that this committee is not truly over. We're not meeting regularly anymore, but there was some bonds that were formed. I think friendships that have been formed that will carry on, and potentially members of this group will continue to be engaged in the projects and many of our projects going forward. So with that, I'll keep it short and sweet and just open it up for questions.
Thank you very much for that. What questions or comments do people have? Yeah, Molly.
Thank you for that. That was really great to see how all that process worked. I'm curious how this process is sort of filtering out to the different departments around the city, and of course, in particular, how it's being applied in transportation.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is kind of our initial rollout right now, where we're going to the different boards and commissions to let you know what it was and what the recommendations are. And eventually this will go to city council. And then our ultimate goal is to get everything into the budget so that we'll have funding behind this and really make a huge impact. And then having more trainings with staff. So as I mentioned, I'm now over at the Housing Commission. So it'll be my colleague, Michelle Bennett, and whoever is hired in my place will be taking this on. But in my conversations with Michelle, the grand plan is just to continue to build the engagement team, so hire more staff, and to continue training staff on these recommendations.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Comments? Anyone else? Yeah, like Molly said, it's really encouraging to see all the work that's been put into this and to see it finally proliferating throughout the city. So thank you very much for coming to our commission meeting. And I guess, yeah, you'll be taking this to other boards and commissions, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then ultimately to city council.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. All right. So Raymond, next topic. I'm not seeing Jane online. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's correct,
Okay.
Brett. I know Jane had indicated she wasn't feeling particularly well, so I wasn't sure if she was going to be able to make it or not. So we'll probably have to postpone this one until next month.
That's fine. Yep, we'll look forward to hearing about this in the upcoming meeting. All right, that was in regards to the 2023 resurfacing and related projects update, by the way. So we will, we'll delay that topic for a future meeting. All right. So next up then is the communications section of the agenda. First, staff report and updates. You should have received a staff report providing project updates with your agenda materials. And Raymond can now review highlights of this and answer any questions. Raymond?
All right. Assuming I can. There we go. All right, thank you, Brett. So as is the usual case, I'll just kind of go through and highlight the changes that have been made from last month to this month. Just kind of highlighting kind of the movement of projects. So Scioto Church, I think Pete mentioned this earlier right before we kicked off, that construction is currently underway and is expected to be completed by August. This is Scioto from Maple to 7th. State Street improvements from William to Huron is currently underway and is expected to be complete before Labor Day. Platte Road construction is also underway and is scheduled to be complete by August. Broadway, another one where construction has kicked off and is also expected to be completed by August. That's from Plymouth to Plymouth. Getty's Avenue resurfacing from Observatory to Highland is right around the corner. Expect that project construction to begin the first week of May. South Main Street water main resurfacing. I think we reported last month that this had started, and that work is currently expected to go through early May. So hopefully in the next month or so, Main Street will be back open. Here on Parkway, Glacier Way is a capital maintenance project. Construction is scheduled to start May 8th and take about a month to complete. So a lot of activity in the construction space. Obviously, the construction season is upon us, so it's always kind of a flurry of activity to kind of get through that. Things that are kind of in the design process and planning phase. East Medical Center. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but could I make a correction?
Sure.
On Main Street, you said that it's supposed to be done by May. The first phase is supposed to be done by May. So I didn't want to build expectations that the whole project would be done by then.
Thanks, Nick, for that clarification. Right, because then it moves to the section to the north of where it currently is.
Correct.
Yeah, and related to that, I was wondering if you could update us on how the Main Street project is affecting, opening the streets on, was it Thursday through Sunday nights? How is that going to be affected by the Main Street construction?
Well, obviously, we won't be able to open the road to, on-street dining during the time that is under construction. So I don't know exactly what the plan is for once the current section that they're working on is done and they move to the north. I'm not sure if it'll be open. The southern section at that point will be open for on-street dining or not. I would have to check.
Okay.
But it's not safe. It's not possible for it to be available while the project's going on.
Certainly, yeah, and that we haven't hit the time period yet where the streets are open yet, right? Is that
I believe we have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I started at the beginning of this month, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right, Nick. I was actually out downtown on Saturday night, and I was actually amazed how many people were going up and down Main Street, even with all the construction activity and the barricades up. It was kind of nice to see a lot of people visiting those businesses. I'm sure there's probably some impact, but there was still a lot of folks. Of course, the weather was beautiful this weekend too, so that probably helped.
Okay.
All right. East Medical Center Drive, you've heard periodic reports on this. So, just as a reminder, there was some direction to go back and based on a resolution passed by council in February, to continue to work with university on both the bridge widening project, but also additional bicycle pedestrian features. So that redesign work is expected to occur this year. And so construction then is targeted for next year. 7th Street and Greenview, again, based on some feedback from council to go back and do some additional work related to the design and incorporation of the all ages and abilities bike facility, and present new designs for feedback. That work is underway. The first public meeting is scheduled for next week, April 25th at 6 p.m. at Pittsfield Branch Library. And all of this, there's these design concepts that will be kind of formulated in the months ahead, and then construction would be anticipated for 2024. A companion project to the one just mentioned is Greenview on the other side of Scioto Church. There was an initial public meeting held on March 16th, and information from that meeting can be found on the project website. You received the update tonight from Jimmy Gilman about e-bike rollout, so I don't need to talk about that anymore. Pardon this typo, this little graph here kind of this chart carried it forward from a previous report. Streetlight implementation, 199 streetlights have been fixed by DTE so far this year, and there was a new streetlight installed at Getty's and Harvard. Traffic calming program, there's a lot of movement in that space. Granger from Forest to Olivia had its second meeting. last week. Fulmer from Miller's Foss will have its second meeting the first week of May. Baldwin from Packard to Stadium will have its first meeting, or had its first meeting at the end of last month. And then Manchester from Buckingham to Needham will have its first meeting next week. So a lot of things coming in that space, and you'll see later on when we discuss items for next agenda, we expect the first phase of Granger, which is between State and Packard, to come to the Transportation Commission next month, if that does receive support from the neighborhood. And the other thing to note here is that the Traffic Calming Subcommittee had its latest meeting on the 4th of April. Transportation plan implementation. So the next meeting of the Vision Zero Implementation Subcommittee will be held next week, next Monday. The speed management program, we've talked to you a little bit about that in the past. We are working with Sam Schwartz on a series of focus groups to kind of further refine that program, make sure we're getting it right. And then the annual snapshot is something we hope to bring back to you next month, which is this idea of kind of a progress report on the efforts that are underway for the transportation plan and the vision, moving together towards Vision Zero plan and the progress that's being made. So there's a kind of interactive dashboard and reporting mechanism that's been developed, and we're putting the finishing touches on that, which we hope to showcase with you next month. Carbon reduction program grants. I don't think we previously reported on this, so I think this one bears mention that we were awarded over $1 million in carbon reduction program funding. This is project funding that's administered by the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, or SEMCOG. So we got 2 grants. The first was for a conversion of DT-owned streetlights, 80% of which are high pressure sodium or lower efficiency light fixtures. We are looking to advance our carbon neutrality goals and bring those up to LED standards. So we have a meeting with them later this week to talk about that. So this would achieve one of the carbon neutrality goals identified in the A20 plan. And then the second is for an all ages and abilities bike corridor on Washington Street. This has been talked about for a while. Some of you maybe heard the term Bicycle Boulevard, and it's been kind of on the books for a while, and now we have some actual funding to move it along. Just so you know, for timelines, the LED conversion project was funded in fiscal year 2024, which that's federal fiscal year, which I believe starts in October 1st. Of this year. So that's when we would start that work. And then the Washington Bike Boulevard project was funded in federal fiscal year 2026. So I know that's a couple years out, but that'll give us an opportunity to start design and engagement on that, and then also try to coordinate that work with, I think, some other utility or resurfacing work that's planned in about that same time period. Quick builds, there was a question earlier, I believe, from Molly about, quick builds. We are working with a design firm, HRC, on kind of the next phase of that design, with a focus on vertical devices to existing buffered bike lanes. And then under education and encouragement, several things going on. Mark your calendars, Friday, May 19th. So a month from now is Bike to Work Day. So our team is working with others across the community, especially like Get Downtown and other partners, to get this up and going and have comfort stations scattered throughout the city for those that want to try biking to work on that day. So there will be a map that's released here shortly with all of those comfort stations. And then the Get Downtown is also launching their commuter challenge. So there's the Conquer the Cold that happens, in the winter, January, February time period, but then the commuter challenge often happens in May. And again, it's a fun way to kind of show, active forms of transportation, how you get to and from and around the city. So Lunch and Learn series we reported on. Again, this is kind of internal facing, but what we're trying to do is kind of institutionalize the Vision Zero plan, making sure other departments are aware of it. So Suzanne Flowers on our team and Cynthia Redinger are hosting those meetings, and our next one is next week. And then the last thing I wanted to mention under education and encouragement, if you've seen some social media posts about my Ann Arbor commute or my A2 commute, what we're trying to do is build up some storylines about how people get around the city and what their experience is like. And so feel free to post things to your social media accounts using that hashtag my A2 commute, because it's information we might want to draw from in the future. And so we're just trying to build up some, trying to use other engagement techniques somewhat along the lines of what you heard from Heather earlier. On the education front, we are hosting a smart cycling course in May. It'll be hosted in 2 sessions from roughly noon to 5 on May 9th and May 16th. This is for people who already know how to bicycle but are looking to be able to cycle a little bit more confidently. And it is for anybody who wants to become a League of American Bicyclists, a league cycling instructor. It is a prerequisite. So if anyone on this commission or in the public is interested, you can either reach out to myself or Suzanne Flowers. We're working on registrations now. Strongest Towns, I think this was promoted last month. Our team, as well as a group from the university, both submitted applications for the city of Ann Arbor to be considered Strongest Towns. We didn't advance, but we put up a good fight all the same. So thanks to those who got into that Strongest Towns competition and voted for Ann Arbor. And then the last 2 things to report on: the Michigan Association of Bicycle or Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals, or APBP. Both Cynthia and Suzanne are affiliated with that. They are the co-chairs for the Michigan chapter. There was a peer exchange on April 3rd, and it went very well. And always looking for opportunities to kind of share best practices and learn from others as well. And I know there's been a lot of interest in kind of our crash reporting, and so we're trying to strike the right note on this. So in the past, we've kind of spelled out in language what those crashes were, but now what we're finding is maybe it's a little better process, since the police department is already providing information to city council. We are taking that information and resharing it with you. So included in the packet were the reports from January and February. Some of the higher profile crashes we had already reported on to you, but maybe not all of those crashes. So those reports are now going to be included in your packet on a regular basis. I will apologize that sometimes the timing of when your packet gets distributed versus when the city council packet gets distributed, they don't always line up very well. So for example, the March report just became available on Monday, but since your packet was already posted, we didn't include the March report, but we will next month. And then maybe if the timing is right, we can include both March and April. And so that's my update, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Questions, Peter?
Raymond, about the crash reports, I have a couple of observations. The first one is that the January report doesn't include any details on a pedestrian crash on Jackson Road or the pedestrian crash at Main and Kingsley. So those are 2 serious crashes that aren't in January's report. And I mean, I guess I don't know why they're not in there, but it looks like even months after they've happened, the January report hasn't been updated to include them. So I guess I would like to request that maybe rather than having a monthly report that's a snapshot in time, that this document could be like a running tally, so that when updates are available, they can be added. So we should be counting those 2 A crashes as having happened in January. My other observation about the January report is that there is a pretty significant, in my mind, error. There was a crash at Stadium and Liberty And this report says that it did not happen at the crosswalk, that the pedestrian was not in a crosswalk. In that case, that crash was a 13-year-old child who was in the crosswalk and did activate the RRFB and did wait for one lane of traffic to come to a complete stop. Somehow the further lane, that car was not able to come to a complete stop. So to me, that's a pretty significant error. And again, I mean, if we continue with this reporting scheme, I don't think it's going to get corrected. I guess what I would prefer instead, rather than putting those details into a summary report like this, I guess I would rather that the crash reports themselves were released in some manner so that we can see those details for ourselves. The other thing I'd like to observe about these, and maybe this is just a minor irritation, is that including a column on helmet usage and crosswalk usage is sort of close to victim blaming. And I don't think that it's something that we should be spending time tabulating. I think that it would be better, like I said, to have the crash reports released so that the details of what happened can be seen. The very last thing I will add is that when we take into account the crashes, the pedestrian crash on Jackson, that was a level A crash, and the pedestrian crash at Main and Kingsley, that brings the total of serious crashes and fatality crashes of pedestrians in Ann Arbor for this year up to 6. Compare that to 7 in all of last year. And in our 5-year rolling average is about 7. We are already at 6. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
And Pete, thanks for those comments. I think I'll have to work with Lieutenant Sherba on a lot of those suggestions, and we can figure out, how to, improve upon this. Again, like I said, we're trying to kind of figure out what the best and most productive way is to share this information. So I tried something different and I got it wrong.
Raymond, I appreciate the information that you're sharing. What I didn't like was that there were errors in it and omissions, right? So we need to get it right, obviously, but that doesn't mean that the process doesn't have. There are still good parts of the process. Let me also take those 3 things that I suggested, those 3 recommendations, and send them to you in a note, just so that we can be clear about what I'm suggesting.
All right, thanks. Dharma?
Sorry. I yelled at my husband that I'm on a call, and then he put flowers on my desk. So I wanted to follow up on the crash reports just because I had a meeting with our regular ward meeting with the police chief, and we were talking about the new police transparency dashboard. And she was mentioning that she thinks that crash data can be added to that. She thinks that that's a capability. That thing just rolled out, so they're slowly working on that. So I don't mean to Lieutenant Sherba would probably have a better idea of this, and I'm not making an announcement. I'm just kind of saying that there might be capacity to self-service on a dashboard, according to what I talked to her about.
All right.
Like Council Member Ekman said, the dashboard is supposed to be rolled out real soon, if not already.
It's out. It just doesn't have crash. It's there. It just doesn't have the crash data.
Oh, it's there already. I know it was pending any day now, so it's probably been active for a couple of days. You're right that I believe the dashboard does have that capability to add, and I think that's a good idea. And that potentially could get that information to Peter more timely as well. I can check with the chief and see if that can be done, and I think it can, and how we'd go about doing that.
Great, very good, thank you. Anything else, Raymond? Staff reports? All right, so any commissioners who specifically serve as a liaison to another body or organization are now invited to provide reports or updates. Molly?
Just a quick update from the traffic calming committee. We had hoped to have a resolution ready this month. I am cautiously optimistic that we will have one for the commission to look at next month. But it's basically like we're getting there and sort of figuring out the it's been a little bit more complicated than we anticipated to sort of figure out what to recommend in terms of what's working and what's not. But we are still working and still meeting, and hopefully next month we'll have something for the commission.
Good to hear. Thank you. Ken.
Hi. So the ride has been working over the last several months to receive and get funding from the Federal Transit Administration for replacement of the Ypsilanti Transit Center. We did get an earmark for that a couple months ago, and so now we're putting out a design contract for planning, design, environmental study, all of that good stuff to get the project moving forward. The RFP is going out now. We're expecting to get proposals back in May. And then hopefully a couple months after that, we'll be able to award the contract and then start moving the planning for the project formally forward. And then the other thing is the millage that we passed back in 2022, the services that we promised as part of that, it's all getting real. Everything that was, or all the services that were proposed in that millage are going to go into effect in fall of 2024. So we're just about wrapped up with the planning efforts for that. And probably within a month or two, we'll finish that up, and then we will make all the information available for public review this fall. So there'll be a short public input period for people to let us, tell us what they think of it. And then most of the services will be implemented in August 2024, but with a little luck and, if the stars align and all that other good stuff, we might be able to move the express bus implementation up as early as as early as April of that year.
That's great. That could sounds like it could be an agenda topic for a future meeting too.
Definitely.
Anyone else? Liaison reports? All right.
Brett, I'm sorry. I just forgot one thing in my monthly update. So, and that was no turn on red signs are going up downtown. So sorry, I missed that. There was a page that I didn't get to, which included the ride update. So Ken filled in that blank. Thank you, Ken. But the one that I didn't cover was no turn on red is going up, and hopefully will be done either later this month or early next month. Thank you.
Great. All right. Okay, commission member communications. All commissioners are invited to provide reports and updates. Any commissioners want to make any comments on anything? Now's the time. All right. Seeing none, call for agenda items. Oh, sorry, Dharma.
Sorry, I just remember that I have something. So I went to an interesting neighborhood, Safe Routes to School meeting this week. In that meeting, also learned that the school city transportation committee, I'm probably getting the name wrong, has been on a long hiatus, but they're meeting again. I think they just had their first meeting yesterday, and Councilmember Song is the council person on that. So just looking forward to what they work on. That's it.
Yeah, I'd love to have that included in staff reports going forward once there've been a couple meetings, so we can hear about it, since we don't have AAPS representation on the commission anymore.
Yeah, I was able to make it for the last 45 minutes or so. I ran up to Dallas after I finished some work yesterday and saw Raymond up there as well. And it was great to see everyone that was there around the table. A lot of voices I hadn't seen or heard of before. And so I think that is a valuable meeting. And so yeah, I definitely agree with Molly that it'd be nice to get a summary whenever that does occur. Raymond, do you have an idea? Is that like a monthly meeting or quarterly or just whenever?
They identified the next meeting as happening next month. I seem to recall that they do go on summer break and they don't meet during the summer. And I don't know if they'll continue to meet monthly when school is in session or not. But yeah, I'm happy to see if we can take information from that and upload it to these monthly staff reports.
Yeah, and maybe preview the next meeting so that people, because it is open to the public. So yeah, if others would like to attend, I think it'd be good to advertise that a little bit. Okay. All right, let's see. All right, call for agenda items. Says Raymond, do you typically go through future agenda topics?
Yeah, I can track some things that we've gotten requests on in the past. So there's been a request for kind of really an explanation about what the All Ages and Abilities Bike Network means and looks like from our plan and what that might mean in implementation. So we are hoping to maybe bring that to you next month. We tentatively have University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute scheduled for an update. We'll have the road resurfacing project coming back. There's also been some discussion about like road reconfigurations or what some called road diets. What does that look like? And what roads are up for consideration for that? I hinted at it earlier, but Granger States Packard, if that gets approved by the neighborhood, that will come to you, the draft resolution. And then I also just added what Molly just mentioned, which is the traffic calming subcommittee. Staff will continue to work with them and hopefully get a resolution to you by next month as well.
Other topics, Julie?
Yeah, I wonder if we could get a staff report about the various options for tracking speed in the city more consistently. And I thought that was put on the future agenda items a few months ago. Did it fall off for a reason or just oversight?
I don't know. I have to get back to you on that. Our ability to do that on a citywide basis is somewhat difficult because we kind of do it the old-fashioned way where we put out counters. So I know we're trying to ramp up our traffic counting program so that it includes non-motorized and speed data. Actually, I just talked to one of my staff members today about what that looks like. So yeah, I think it's definitely something we want to try to get a handle on, but we haven't really cracked that nut yet.
Okay, thanks. Keep working on it.
Yeah, more data is always better. Dharma?
Yeah, a couple items. One that I think we talked about in the last meeting as being a potential future item was like revisiting our crossing guidelines. I think that's what it was called, for lack of a better term. We kind of went through what's sort of being applied, but I think we talked about there being some value in talking about what it means in the city of Ann Arbor. And then the pilot speed management program, maybe that's not ready yet to present, but it was really called out in the budget. You mentioned it in your report, Raymond, for the year, and it would just be good to hear more about what the plan is.
All right. Okay, well, if that's all, then I guess we'll close. The next meeting is going to be held on Wednesday, May 17th at 7 p.m. Again, this will be a virtual meeting. So if there are no objections, we will adjourn our April 19th, 2023 meeting. Any objections? All right, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Right.